And we continue at 2:05 in the afternoon on the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang's across the glass.
John, it's Friday. That means it's payday, so it's time for everyone to make like Cecily Meyer Cruz and
get that money.
Well, she gets that money not just on payday, but whenever the contract's up.
We demand higher pay.
And that's why you keep getting reelected. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a candidate for governor of the state of California. You can follow him on X at Steve Hilton X and find him online at goldentogether.com. Steve Hilton, welcome.
Well, it's great to be with you, John, and I appreciate the invitation. But, of course, the only reason I'm really here is because I met a wonderful couple in my local grocery store in the Bay Area up in, miles from where you are. And you're across the state now. And they said to me, look, why aren't you on John Phillips? We listen to John Phillips every day. You need to be on there. So I said, I got to do it. And here I am.
Well, it sounds like your neighbors have great taste.
I wouldn't say that. No, of course. And everyone in California needs to listen to the show. So that's the most important thing.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words, and thank you for stopping by on this Friday afternoon. Let's start out with the top news of the week here in California, which is that Gavin Newsom has given control of his social media accounts to the theater kids. And, oh, boy, do the theater kids have fun with his social media accounts. And they are going after everyone. They're going after Bed Bath & Beyond, or whatever the hell they're calling themselves now. They're going after fire victims. They're going after members of the legislature in very personal terms, including sexual terms with some of them. What do you make of what Gavin Newsom is doing? And do you think it's something that is going to benefit him in the long term? I know in the short term, he's jumped to the top of the polls in the Democratic primary for president. But liberals may look at this and find it amusing now. He doesn't look presidential. Your thoughts?
Yeah, but he's been all over the place this year. Remember, he started out this year trying to suck up to the Republican Party and saying, I've got Charlie Kirk on my pie, I can reach out. I like Republicans. I even agree with you on biological boys and girls sports, all this kind of nonsense. Of course, he didn't do anything about it. He just said it. But that was his strategy. And it completely flopped. It went nowhere. He was completely attacked by the Democratic Party. So, of course, because this is a guy who literally believes in nothing other than his own political advancement, he just does a 180 and says, right, well, that didn't work, so let's do the opposite. Let's attack Trump. Let's troll him on social media. Let's be the exact opposite of what I was just a couple of months ago. And actually, this time round, in the short term, it does seem to be working for him. He clearly is striking a chord with the base, and in the end, that's his only focus right now because he wants their votes in the Democratic primary in a couple of years' time. And so I think he'll be very happy with where he is now. But in the process, I think he's completely destroying what little there was of his reputation anyway. And our job, all of us in California, is to point out to the rest of the country what a complete failure he is on every front. The worst governor in the country, maybe the worst in when you actually list the ways in which California is the worst performing state in the nation under Gavin Newsom's rule. Highest unemployment rate, highest poverty rate, highest cost of gas, electricity, water, worst business climate, on and on. I mean, we've talked about this before. It's a catastrophic failure. So our job is to point all that out. And so no amount of trolling and this pathetic social media stunts, I think, are going to counteract that. Because in the end, this is a guy who's incapable of doing any kind of serious job properly.
Well, I think the knock on him in the Democratic primary will be that he's an inauthentic flake. And you look at what he's doing right now, and at the same time that he's clearly doing everything he can to position himself to be the Democratic nominee for president, he's saying he has zero ambition to be president. Sub-zero interest is, I think, the exact quote that he keeps repeating over and over and over again. And you look at his moves and you look at what he's doing, And it's obvious to everyone this guy is running for president. Yet at the same time that he's doing that, he's looking you in the eye and saying, I'm not running for president. I have no interest in that. That's not going to happen. And I just wonder if there's anyone out there who believes in any kind of authenticity at all coming from Gavin Newsom.
I don't think so, but I think remember, it's a small electorate. That's all he cares about. He's clearly not interested in his current job. I mean, he hasn't been for years. I mean, we've been saying that for years. He has no interest. It's all about his next move. And it's a very small audience. It's the Democrat primary audience. And I think that in the short term, it'll get him somewhere. But I think you're right that the inauthenticity, that's a killer these days. I mean, people can sniff that out, and they really, really hate it. And so even if it gets him a bit of traction with the Democrat base because he's taking a fight to Trump and all the things that they love, I think that in the end, especially that's the point of a presidential primary process. And we've seen it time and time again. The people who go into it looking strong or this or that, the fact that they have to go through these rounds of votes in different parts of the country, people sniff it out. And I just think that in the end, the total BS, which is all he has to offer, is going to be revealed. I agree with you about that.
We're also going through a Gavin Mander of the state's congressional districts right now, where he's going to try to draw 5 more districts for the Democrats to counteract what the state of Texas is doing. If that happens, it may lead to other states, including Florida, Indiana, and others, Missouri, who would redraw their lines. And if everyone redraws their lines, Republicans would be expected to gain about 9 seats because the Democrats have already gerrymandered in places where they have the ability to do so, and they've gotten all the juice out of the squeeze. Because of that, that issue will be front and center here in California, as California voters will be voting on that in November in a special election. Do you fear that given the fact that the federal government is now front and center in California politics, that we're going to go through yet another cycle for governor where all we do is talk about federal subjects and state subjects, which have been neglected for decades, are going to be put on the sidelines yet again?
Well, my job is to make sure that doesn't happen. I completely agree with you that that's the risk, and that's what the Democrats want, right? You look at every single Democrat running for governor. All they ever talk about is Trump, Trump, Trump. Watch their launch video, Katie Porter. I'm going to stand up to Trump, because they know they can't talk about what's happened in California because it's a disaster and their party created it. And they don't have anything different to say. There's none of them saying, yeah, we're going to end the climate extremism and this ridiculous climate policy that's made everything so expensive. None of them are saying that, or the soft on crime policies, or the sanctuary policies, or any of this stuff, the union power over our public schools. None of them are saying that because they can't, because they're all owned by the unions and the activists. So their only hope is to make it a national election. But it's our job not to let them get away with it and to point out to people voting in the elections next year, this is your life, this is your state. So much of what you're pissed off about every single day when you go and fill up your car, when you pay the bills every month, that is the result of Democrat policies here in California, nothing to do with the federal government. And so if you want change, you're going to have to vote for it, and that means voting Republican. And my plan, of course, is to be the leading Republican champion for change. And part of that is to point out their total failure. But the other part is to show how we're going to do better. That's why I've been putting out plans, for example, for $3 gas by getting rid of the climate regulations and so on. So I think that they definitely want it to be a national election, but it's our job to make sure it isn't.
When you travel around the state and you speak to different groups, and I assume that your path crosses with many of these other candidates, including not just the Republican candidates, but the Democratic candidates too, do you get the impression when they talk about, let's say, the bullet train or the insurance crisis, that they have any interest in it, that they've been thinking about those subjects and have solutions for those subjects, that they've even done the reading? Because when I see them go on with Alex Michelson or others, and they're asked about those subjects, it's almost as if it's like a trick question for them, that it's a question that they didn't anticipate, that it came out of nowhere. It's something that they really don't have any ideas on. And they're running in this race because they want to be the antithesis to Trump. But outside of that, they really haven't thought anything else through.
100%. That's exactly right. They don't have any solutions. They just have these slogans. So they understand that the number one issue for Californians is just how everything is so expensive and it's impossible to live here. And the California dream has gone and no one can afford a house and all those things that we know every day. It's the number one reason people are leaving. And so they keep talking about, affordability. You hear them all the time. We need to have affordable. They don't have a plan to do that. Why? Because the way you get there is to reverse their own party's policies. So let's just take gas prices. I mean, they say, it's gas prices. I heard that. I've done debates with them where they've said gas prices are too high. Yeah, why? Because of the low carbon fuel standard, because of the cap and trade scheme, because of your commitment to net zero by 2045. All of that is what's pushing, because the refinery regulations, because of the war on California domestic oil and gas production. All of those are the reasons that gas is so expensive. And by the way, and everything else as well, because the climate policies, the carbs policies and regulations are the reason housing is so expensive and so on. They're not going to change that. They won't even admit that's the reason. They just talk about it like a slogan and think they're going to get away with it. But they don't know. They haven't dealt with a candidate like me before, frankly. They haven't met someone who really understands the issues, who understands the policy, and who can make an argument strongly and convincingly on any of these subjects. So I think they've got a really nasty shock next year. You watch the way they behave and also the way the media are covering them. They completely assume it's just going to be, this whole fight for governor is basically between the Democrats, and is it Katie Porter, or is it going to be someone else? They don't know what's coming to them next year. It's going to be a very different election to any that they've faced before.
We're speaking with Steve Hilton, candidate for governor. You can follow him on X at Steve Hilton X. Steve, on the subject of affordability, I want to pick your brain based on a tweet that I saw from Palmer Luckey, who is a billionaire, an entrepreneur, someone who has made a lot of money here in the state of California. And he had a tweet out about the cost of living, saying that the cost of living and the cost of housing is directly related to public safety, where if you have entire areas, particularly in big cities that are high density, where crime is so bad that normal people won't live there. Normal people won't spend time there because they know that if they do, they're likely to be the victim of a crime. They're likely to have something bad happen to them, that sort of thing. Let's just take the Tenderloin in San Francisco, for example. If the Tenderloin was a clean, safe place, that is a high-density neighborhood in San Francisco where you could, in theory, put a lot of people and open up a lot of housing that would, in theory, reduce the cost of housing in San Francisco. Do you see public safety and the cost of living as issues that are connected to one another?
There is a connection, but it's not the whole story. I mean, we want our cities and neighborhoods and suburbs to be safe anyway, regardless of whether or not it affects the housing costs or the cost of living. So I completely agree with that. That's why I put out a plan for what the governor can do about that, because mostly the safety issues are local with a strong role, obviously, for police chiefs and sheriffs and so on. But actually what the governor can do is reverse the prison closure program, which has meant that we have so many violent criminals either released onto the streets or put into county jails, which means that they're completely overcrowded, which means that people who should be in jail are not. So that's the role that you can play from the governors at the governor's level. But beyond that, I would say, yes, it's true that there are certain people who, if it were safer, they would want to live in a place like that. But remember what people really want in California. Most people who want, and especially when they're starting a family, they want a single family home. And for the last decade or more, there's been a war on single-family homes in California because the climate extremists hate single-family homes. They want people to live in apartments. They're obsessed with this idea of density. They look at everything they're doing, whether that's on the rebuilding of the Palisades or anything else. It's like, you've got to live in an apartment with no parking, and you've got to use transit and all this. That's not how people want to live in California. When they want to raise a family, they want to live in the suburbs enjoy our weather with a house, with a yard. That's what people want. And the Democrats have denied them that because of their ideology. So I think that's the real answer to housing, is to give people what they want, not force them to live the way that some ideological viewpoint tells them.
On the subject of the bullet train, whenever your Democratic opponents are asked about it, they differ from Gavin Newsom in that Gavin Newsom says the bullet train is a great success and there's nothing wrong with it. We just need to keep moving forward. The Democratic candidates for governor aren't willing to go that far. They acknowledge that the bullet train has 1,000,001 problems, but none of them want to cut bait on it. What they say is what the bullet train needs is for me to be in charge. And if only I were in charge, the bullet train would be a success. So if you want to save the bullet train, you need to elect me. And of course, that allows them to thread the needle. Well, they acknowledge reality, but they don't upset the unions that want to keep that project going forever. I don't see a way to make that project successful. We should have cut bait a long time ago. We didn't. Every day that we allow that project to go on, we're wasting more money. What would you do with the bullet train if elected governor?
Well, everything you said is completely right. And I want to add one important point to it, which is that I mentioned earlier the components of the high gas prices we have, which are crippling working Californians in particular who use their cars more to get to work, driving hours a day. 25% of the cap and trade taxes that's what the cap and trade system is. It's a fancy name for taxes on anyone who produces or uses fossil fuel. 25% of that money is paying for the bullet train. So when every time you fill up your car with this insane gas prices, a quarter of that part of the excess goes to pay for the bullet train. So it's outrageous. Just remember that when you fill up your car. You're also completely correct that this is driven by the unions. One absolutely hilarious example of that. There was a candidate forum for the Democrat candidates a few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago. They were all asked about the bullet train. Katie Porter, I think, was the most negative about it. I don't think we should continue it. Within hours, she was got at by the unions, who they can't afford to piss off in any way, and changed her position. Said, no, actually, I do think we should build it. So it is entirely the unions who are forcing them into this ridiculous position of supporting this complete joke of a project. And so, of course, we need to cancel it, and we need to stop putting good money after bad. I spent a lot of time in the Central Valley. I'm talking to lots of people about what we can actually do. They have built this ridiculous, this infrastructure there that they've already spent some of our money on. Not a single mile of track's been laid. But there's maybe some stuff we can do to repurpose what's already been built so we're not completely wasting it. But no more money. It's a joke. Also, who's going to use this train? I mean, everything about it is ridiculous. It's going to take longer than flying. People who want to get around from between LA and San Francisco have many options at the moment. Meanwhile, our roads are crumbling. They're nearly the worst in the country. You've got people trying to pick their kids up from school, stuck in traffic jams. That's where we should be focusing transportation money on things that actually matter to everyday people.
Steve Hilton, candidate for governor. You can get him online at goldentogether.com and follow him on X at Steve Hilton X. Steve, thanks so much for stopping by. Have a great weekend.
Angie, great to be with you, John.
It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the founding member of Recall Gavin Newsom 2020. You can get him online at rebuildcalifornia.com and follow him on X at Netter Mike. Mike Netter, welcome.
I'm so happy to be here today. I had a very upsetting experience last night. I probably shouldn't talk about it on the air, John Phillips, but tell me when you're ready.
A very upsetting. What did you eat at Chipotle?
No, it was worse than that. Because of what I do for a living, quasi for a living, you might say, because I don't always get paid, I had to watch the Gavin Newsom YouTube presentation of him talking. And John Phillips, it was 30 minutes where I almost jumped in a plane, flew to Sacramento, and burst in the room, but I just didn't have the time.
What do you make his behavior of late? I just had Steve Hilton on, who's a candidate for governor, and I asked him about Gavin's personality transplant and his aggressive behavior on social media, all of the strange things that he's doing that's making him very popular right now in the short term with Democrats. But if he's trying to look presidential, he's doing everything but that. Your thoughts?
Well, you have a degree in political science, and full disclosure, I don't have a degree in psychology, but I do know a whack when I see one. And the strange thing that struck me yesterday is I didn't do the count because I couldn't, but the times he mentioned Donald Trump, I would say the over-under in 45 minutes was probably almost in triple digits. And I thought originally this was going to be about his Prop 50, but where he got into line about things, but he talked about a Trump hat. He actually Trump derangement syndrome, I don't even think it's a good term for it. He's kind of got his own specific disease when it comes to, shall we say, Donald Trump paranoia. But I do want to go on record as saying, John Phillips, I really think that Gavin is smarter than he looks, kind of an understatement because he doesn't look that smart. This is really about watch what I'm doing with the left hand. And in my opinion, the trick is really taking place in the right hand. And that's something that we ought to be focusing on.
And what trick do you think he's pulling right now?
Well, this is a shock. It's all about money. Okay, everybody out there, please pull your cars over. Try not to get too run off the road, if you will. The reality is, Gavin Newsom, from the begin with, and I talked about this, I called in your show a month ago or so, is actually taking and raising. He's bragging about how much money he's raising, not about how he's saving the state, et cetera, et cetera. And he's actually, in my opinion, kind of walking the line of legality. I mean, Gavin is so cheap in spending his own money. He spent, looks like, state funds on his alleged rally a few weeks ago, in effect pushing what we know will be his presidential campaign. And it's interesting when you look at the fine print of the 14,702,000, I counted them, texts and emails I got from Gavin yesterday. I'm starting to feel very close to him. Every single one of them at the bottom said, top funder, which is required, was Gavin Newsom for governor in 2022. These huge wads of money that he's stashing away for a 6-week run won't really be spent. And then comes, of course, the point of legality. What is that money going to be? What's going to be done with the leftovers? And legally, he can't really spend that on a federal campaign. So, of course, let's be clear, he's not running for president. But he's certainly using this to raise his national profile and stash a large amount of cash. And in my opinion, that's really what this is about. The political risk of Gavin Newsom losing Proposition 50, as it's now called, transferred from ACA 8 yesterday, is pretty big. If he loses, or it's even fairly close, like it was with his mental health initiative, Prop 1, about a year ago, that's a pretty big risk to Gavin's career. So what's the motivation? It's got to be money.
Well, I would imagine if you go on the website, the first thing he asks you is for your email, for your name, what state you live in, that sort of thing. He is using this as an excuse to build a national database.
I'll buy that to a point, because having started the recall and understanding voter rolls, and Gavin is certainly surrounded by people making lots of money who know this space, lots of that information is available. You can buy lists, you can do whatever. That certainly will help him build the national database. And by the way, if anybody's getting lost in this conversation, he's supposed to be the governor of California. But again, what the Democrats are trying, a history lesson, isn't new. I think Gavin is riding on an old idea from 2015, and he's just found a way to gather cash on this.
As someone who knows him well, Do you believe Gavin Newsom is at his core a liberal, or is he whatever he has to be to accumulate as much power as possible? And the goal is not political philosophy or ideology, but the goal is to accumulate as much power as he can.
Definitely the latter, 100%. I mean, even the left is going, really? You got on with Charlie Kirk and, oh, we shouldn't have women and boys sports, or, I'm saying boys and women's sports. What caused you to change position? Now he's like, well, the oil companies, maybe they're not so bad. Gavin doesn't stand for ideology. He really, in my opinion, stands for the idiocy, which is Gavin himself. Look, the reality is Gavin Newsom, in my opinion, has an addictive personality from his early days. Cocaine, shall we say women, other things. Obviously, he admitted he had an alcohol problem. I think he's really addicted to power. Jerry Brown said this in an interview that this is an addicting sport, politics itself, and Gavin's only level to go up is actually into federal office. And for him, that will be president of the United States.
If one of Gavin's opponents in the Democratic primary were to pull you aside and say, hey, Mike, let me buy you a drink. I want to pick your brain on a subject, and ask you, where is Gavin vulnerable? Where is his Achilles heel? What is it that AOC or Mayor Pete or Andy Bashar or Rahm Emanuel, what is it that they should do that can exploit his weaknesses and knock him down a peg or two? What would you tell them?
I would tell them Gavin himself. I think part of the problem is, and the reason I started watching that YouTube video yesterday, or presentation as they call it, is when you watch Gavin Newsom speak, when Gavin gets questions or even has to speak to an audience, I don't know that he's even paying attention to his own talk track. Look, there is a famous interview out from many years ago, probably 10 now, with Adam Carolla. You remember that, when he asked Gavin about bank accounts for underprivileged people, and Gavin he made Kamala Harris, I'm sorry to say this, almost look coherent. Emphasis on the almost, okay? But I think the biggest thing is that Gavin, under pressure, when he actually is in a situation where he'll have to serve on the presidential debate stage and go back and forth, let's not forget something, that Gavin Newsom's political career, in fact, most of his entire life, he hasn't really faced pressure situations. He became a surrogate of the Gettys. They kind of raised him through. He won his elections quite handily. I've looked this up before. And he has never really faced pressure. And I think what Gavin Newsom, when you find him facing pressure, example was the way he acted when the recall made the ballot. He got very nervous. He got very worried. He gave political speeches, etc. And he could spend all his time talking us, the proponents, down. The Republicans, look, the budget's balanced. Why are we doing this? We have all this excess money. I'd like to remind you, Gavin, that didn't work out so well in the long run. Why would we spend $200 million on an election? Wait, now he wants to, but never mind. But my point is, he doesn't talk about what he's done. He talks a lot about like when he talks about Trump, what other people are doing or haven't done. I've never really seen Gavin talk a lot about his record. When you talk, is he really a liberal? Is he really a middle of the road? I'm not sure that Gavin Newsom actually knows. Can I give you a quick reminder, John Phillips?
Sure.
Gavin Newsom, by his own admission, has severe dyslexia. Nothing against people with dyslexia. He admits that he has extreme trouble reading. Now, to me, what that says is this is someone, even though we have pictures of him reading a book, hopefully not upside down, that he's not reading a lot of his own stuff, making his own conclusions, that people are giving him information. This is by its own admission, not a comprehension problem, but a reading problem. So who is feeding Gavin Newsom, kind of a la Joe Biden, if you will, except Joe didn't know, let's go with what's going on. Who is feeding him this information and shaping this? It seems to always be that Gavin's happy place is running for office or running against something, not really advocating for something, whether I agree with the issue or not.
Which of the candidates for president in the Democratic primary do you think poses the biggest threat to Gavin?
I would say all of them. I don't know that Gavin really polls that well. I mean, that's difficult for me to say because I'm kind of a right side guy. Do you know what I mean? And you look at a lot of them and they don't really appeal to me. I think the problem the Democratic Party has, why Gavin is kind of even rising in the national conversation, which frankly I think the Republican Party had till Trump came along, and we have in California, is that there is no one singular person that you can say, this is the person I would like to be president, regardless of party. This is the person that's the leader of my party. I think that's a reason, and there's plenty of articles out there right now why the Democrats are struggling to raise money, so to speak. They're struggling to bring in the cash that they will. As you've probably seen, I'm sure their top donors have dropped off dramatically in the last 6-8 months. And I don't think that's just because Trump won the presidency. That's because Gavin is filling a void at this point for someone who needs to speak up for what the Democratic Party thinks they are. And I want to emphasize that a little bit, because when you talk about who's the best person versus Gavin, the Democratic Party seems to be at this point everybody else who isn't Republican. When we know with the Republicans what we stand for, less government, right, et cetera, the Democrats go, hey, you're for this issue? May not be at our core, but come on in. You're for this issue? Hey, we may not be for it at our core, but come on in. And pretty soon they go, well, the room is full of people that we've invited in that have core issues that not only don't resonate with the American public, but the average person doesn't agree with. And then the press broadcasts these issues thinking that that's what the American public wants. And most of the public, as we know, doesn't. They really want to live their lives, tell their kids what to do when, not pay too much for gas, steak, etc., and like to have a good job. And Trump discovered that during the election, and it's kind of funny when you ask who would be the best person against Gavin. Gavin, I almost never see him. He brags about the state. We're the fourth largest economy. Well, we're not the fourth largest net economy, but let's roll with that. What else you got, Gavin? What about this homeless? Oh, yeah, it's not my fault. You spent $24 billion. You mean you spent $24 billion and didn't have an accounting for the money? Pretty much. So, Gavin, you never see him really talk about the things that really strike at the core of the everyday person in California because, in my not so humble opinion, he started with ideology in San Francisco. We're going to let San Francisco be a liberal city. We're going to do what it needs to do. I can run an ideology and get away with it in San Francisco, which is, again, only about 765,000 people, punches over its weight. But when Gavin has to get to the bigger stage, which is where he's kind of moved to in California, now people want to know about issues because you affect their life. And the presidency is even a much larger stage. And I think Gavin has demonstrated he's not ready to be governor of California, in my opinion. And I certainly don't think he's demonstrating he's been such a fantastic governor that he's ready to be president of the United States. But there is one key person that doesn't believe that. You know who it is, right?
Who's that?
Gavin himself. Okay? Okay. Gavin thinks I've always won. This is what I've done. And I'm not reading what's going on. People are giving me information and telling me around me because I have them in high-paying jobs and high-paying consultants around me. And I don't think he's really thinking it through. If you really take a step back, whether you're liberal or conservative, right, left, short, tall, male, female, and watch that video, which is still online yesterday, and you hear about Gavin saying, well, we need to conquer Congress because Trump might run for a third term. Dude, have you, read the Constitution? Congress can't just declare Trump running for a third term. I mean, he went on for that about 3 or 4 minutes and brought it up twice. Somebody gave me a Trump 2028 hat. Great. Someone's making money selling hats, Gavin. Hopefully they're a California company because they need the money.
Mike Netter.
Yes.
Yeah, we're out of time. We got to run, but thank you so much for stopping by. Founding member of the Recall Gavin Newsom 2020 campaign. You can follow him on X at Netter Mike. Mike Netter, thanks so much for stopping by.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's the John Phillips Show.